This is the Capitol Rundown.
It was an important decision the court made that recognized there is no constitutional right to an abortion.
Today, the United States Supreme Court said, no, no, no. We don't have the right as women to make our own decision.
This bill is a compromise. It doesn't do everything I want, but what we are doing will save thousands of lives.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Capitol Rundown. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. It has been another busy week in the nation's capital and in Michigan's capital, so we've got a lot to talk about today. And we're going to start with one of the biggest stories in a generation. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Roe v. Wade decision on Friday. That was the decision that made abortion a constitutional right. Now it's up to each state to decide whether to allow abortion or not. Skylar Henry starts us off with the decision and the reaction.
Protesters erupted outside the Supreme Court after the justices ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade.
I kept hoping for the best, but it's clear that these justices don't care about the majority of Americans and their voices.
This is going to be like history. This is just the beginning of, the pro-life generation, being there for women, for the unborn.
Writing for the majority, Justice Samuel Alito said the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Chief Justice John Roberts joined the other 5 conservatives in upholding Mississippi's abortion ban, but wrote he would have stopped short of overruling Roe outright.
It's a sad day for the court and for the country.
President Biden called the decision wrong and extreme.
Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk.
The court's 3 liberals agreed, writing they dissented with sorrow for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection. The court's ruling wasn't a surprise. It had been forecast several weeks ago following a leaked draft indicating which way the justices were leaning. The decision is expected to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states.
This decision is a victory for the pro-life movement and for the generations of Americans who never gave up hope.
The ruling puts the court at odds with a majority of Americans. CBS News polling found 2/3 wanted the court to leave Roe v. Wade in place, as it has been for nearly half a century. Skylar Henry, CBS News, at the Supreme Court.
As you might imagine, there are strong feelings on both sides of the issue. Both sides held rallies to celebrate and mourn the decision, and politicians are similarly split depending on their point of view. Congressman John Moolenaar is among those applauding the Supreme Court.
It was an important decision the court made that recognized there is no constitutional right to an abortion, and they corrected the mistakes that were made years ago. And so I think it's an important day, and want to celebrate every human life.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the aisle, Senator Debbie Stabenow thinks the court got it wrong.
Today, the United States Supreme Court said, no, no, no. We don't have the right as women to make our own decision. The Supreme Court justices make our decisions. A group of politicians make our decisions. That's who makes the decisions for women. And it's outrageous, and it will unfortunately cost women's lives.
Coming up on the Rundown, we're going to talk about the events of January 6th and continue the conversation about the role Michigan played on that day. So stay tuned. The Capitol Rundown will be right back. Thursday marked the 5th public hearing for the committee investigating the January 6, 2021 insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, where we found out just how close the country came to a coup and how the Justice Department fought back against former President Trump. Serena Marshall explains.
The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack used its 5th hearing of June to show how former President Trump wanted to use the Justice Department to legitimize his false claims of election fraud.
What I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman.
The former president's own appointees at the DOJ refused and told him there was no fraud.
And he had this arsenal of allegations. I went piece by piece to say, no, that's false. That is not true.
Mr. Trump then tried to replace former acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen with Jeffrey Clark, the DOJ's environmental lawyer and a supporter of Mr. Trump's cause.
Listen, the best I can tell is the only thing you know about environmental and elections challenges is they both start with E.
Clark wanted the DOJ to push for a special legislative session in several states to overturn the election results. In an Oval Office meeting on January 3rd, top DOJ officials threatened to resign en masse if Clark was promoted.
No one is going to read this letter. All anyone is going to think is that you went through 2 attorneys general in 2 weeks until you found the environmental guy to sign this thing.
At the end of the hearing, the committee showed how several Republican congressmen asked for pardons.
A general tone was, we may get prosecuted because we were defensive of, the president's positions.
Clark, who was never named acting attorney general, invoked the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times during his deposition to the committee. Serena Marshall, CBS News, Washington.
The Thursday hearing was the second hearing of the week. The first one took place on Monday, and it focused on the efforts that former President Donald Trump and his supporters put on people to overturn the results of the election, including their efforts here in Michigan. Republican Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, who was summoned to the White House, described what happened after Trump tweeted out his cell phone number, encouraging people to call on Shirkey to change the outcome of the Michigan presidential race.
It was a loud noise, loud, consistent cadence of, we hear that the Trump folks are calling and asking for changes in the electors, and you guys can do this. Well, they were believing things that were untrue.
And Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson described how she felt when Republicans and Trump supporters gathered outside of her house to protest the election results.
We started to hear the noises outside my home, and my stomach sunk, and I thought, it's me. And then it's just, we don't know what's going to, the uncertainty of that was what was the fear. Like, are they coming with guns? Are they going to attack my house?
When we come back, it was another big week for the gun debate in Washington. We'll have the latest from both the nation's capital and across the street at the U.S. Supreme Court. That's when the Capitol Rundown returns. It was a big week for gun control in Washington, and that's because on Thursday, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Americans have the right to carry firearms in public. It's being called a major expansion of gun rights, but the 6-3 decision will only affect a handful of states that make up about a quarter of the U.S. population. The ruling struck down a New York law that required people who wanted to carry a gun in public give a specific reason for doing so. But a big step towards gun control also happened in Washington this week. Late Thursday night, the Senate voted almost 2-1 for a big control bill, and on Friday afternoon, the House approved it too. Now, the vote came after weeks of negotiations prompted by mass shootings at a grocery store in Buffalo and a school in Texas. It expands background checks and bars more domestic violence offenders from buying them. It also funds efforts to seize weapons from troubled individuals and increases federal support for school security and mental wellness programs.
I don't believe in doing nothing in the face of what we saw in Uvalde and we've seen in far too many communities.
This bill is a compromise. It doesn't do everything I want. But what we are doing will save thousands of lives.
But Michigan Representative Tim Walberg says he's not thrilled about the bill. He's concerned about red flag laws and any law that might take guns away from people without allowing them to make the case to keep them.
If you're not going to mandate that there is a ability to confront the person who makes the charge or makes the report and be able to defend yourself, regardless of how unseemly the person might be, we still believe in giving people constitutional rights.
Well, coming up, we're going to move from Washington to Michigan to talk about an ad that's getting a lot of attention.
Why is it that dead people always vote Democrat?
We're going to hear from the candidate behind it and tell you the truth about whether dead people are voting in Michigan's elections. That's next on the Capitol Rundown. You might have noticed an unusual political ad running in Michigan. In it, Republican candidate for governor Kevin Rinke discusses election fraud and says he would take it on as governor. Take a look.
Why is it that dead people always vote Democrat?
Michigan does audit its elections, and incidents of voter fraud are investigated. In the November 2020 general election, multiple audits at the state and local level conducted by officials from both the Republican and Democratic parties found no evidence of fraud that could impact the results. And those dead voters, the state checked that out as well. In the almost 12 million votes cast over 8 elections between May of 2019 and November of 2020, there were about 2,800 votes, roughly 0.02% of those cast linked to voters who were dead. Almost all of those were cast by people who mailed in absentee ballots then died before Election Day. That is not fraud, and per Michigan law, those votes were not counted. For the rest, the auditors point to clerical errors, and they recommend expanding the pre-processing of absentee ballots to make these issues easier to spot. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson's office says it is not aware of a single confirmed case of a ballot being cast on behalf of a dead person in Michigan in the last presidential election. So, dead people voting, not a major problem in Michigan's elections. So the Capitol Rundown caught up with the candidate on the campaign trail to ask him about his ad and the reaction to it. Here's what he had to say.
It's a tongue-in-cheek ad, and it's not meant to be serious. It's meant to get people's attention, and I got to tell you, it has been wildly successful. There are people that dislike it. There are people that really like it a lot. And the common denominator is the name in the ad is being talked about all over. But let's take it a step further. What's really important isn't the zombie or the tongue-in-cheek comment about dead people voting. What is important is about election integrity. And that has nothing to do with 2020. Election integrity has been a standard and needs to be a standard that the people of Michigan and the people of our country are comfortable with. Government needs to provide a fair, open, accessible, honest, accurate vote where people recognize that they get one vote and it counts.
We talked to state and county officials about Rinke's claims. One called it disinformation. They say the system already works and a lot of the proposals Rinke makes are already in effect. Here's how he responds.
Well, I'm sure that there's a series of checks and balances, and yet every single election office recognizes and acknowledges that there are irregularities that occur. Maybe in their audits they catch them, maybe they don't. What we're talking about is tightening up existing rules that are already in place and enforcing those rules because the confidence of the voter has been shaken.
The attention-getting ad wasn't the only thing to happen to Kevin Rinke this week. He also got the endorsement of a famous Michigander. Rocker Ted Nugent says he's backing the businessman in his bid to lead the state. Nugent says Rinke would represent, quote, God, family, country, Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the 10 Commandments, the Golden Rule, that amazing Michigan work ethic, and law and order. Nugent, a rock and roll star, also known as the Motor City Madman, has also dabbled in politics over the years and is a well-known conservative. When we come back, we have a conversation with the man who helps us make sense of it all. We're going to check in with Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic, so stay tuned for Tim's take when the Capitol Rundown returns. Welcome back. In Washington, should President Joe Biden run for re-election? And in Michigan, how could a write-in candidate affect the vote count on August 2nd? Here now to break it all down for us is Jorma Duran and Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic. Tim, I want to get kind of some information regarding future write-in campaigns for Michigan governor and how that may impact voting machines. What's going on?
We discovered in talking to a source that if indeed Perry Johnson runs as a write-in candidate for governor, and he's making that decision even as we speak, he intends to send out name stickers to his supporters. The theory being they take these name stickers to the polls, they put it on the ballot, okay, and then they put it in the machine. Here's the only problem. The machines are not programmed to do the name stickers, and if the stickers come off, they literally will gum up the works, if you'll pardon the expression. And the clerks are very concerned. You know, there are like 5,000 precincts around the state. One machine out at every precinct is a headache. One described them to me as a nightmare waiting to happen. Not predicting that this would happen, but it is one of the factors that the Johnson campaign is now considering after they saw our story on this. You'd hate to spend a couple $1 million to send your name out there and then the thing not count, because if it comes off, there's no way of counting it and that vote would be lost.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of conflicting reports regarding Governor Whitmer, and she was being asked if whether or not President Joe Biden should run, will he run, and what I'm being told is she wasn't really responding with, yeah, I got Biden's back no matter what. What do you know?
Well, here's what we do know. She was asked the question on NBC News, should Joe Biden run again for a second term? And she, as we say in the vernacular, punted. She basically told the reporter, I'm not going to answer the question. And she did it very nicely in her gubernatorial way. But the question is, look at she and Mr. Biden are quite close. I had a source, Jorma, tell me that he wanted to pick her for vice president. That's how close they were, but politics got in the way of that decision. And remember, she did say that if he had asked, she would have said yes. So you would think that good friends would want to campaign together, except if you want to win an election and one of the two of you is a liability, maybe you don't want to campaign together.
All right, Tim, always great to talk with you. We appreciate it.
And thank you, Jorma, and thank you, Tim. And if you're interested in getting more Michigan political news in your inbox, we've got just the thing. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen. It will take you right to the sign-up page, or you can go to WLNS.com/newsletters. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.